It was supposed to be a place of peace, but on December 29th, 1170, blood soaked the stone floor of Canterbury Cathedral. A priest, calm in prayer, was murdered by 4 knights, not in a battlefield, not in a dark alley, but in a cathedral meant to echo hymns, not screams. This wasn't just murder, it was a political execution, inside a house of God. And the priest who died? He once shared wine and laughter with the very king who now wanted him gone. So what happened? How did a trusted friend become a traitor in the eyes of the crown? And what pushed 4 knights to draw steel in the most sacred place in England, leaving behind a corpse and a legacy that still haunts history? Keep watching, because what went down in that cathedral was darker than most people dare to remember. Before he wore robes of power, Thomas Becket wore the weight of expectation. Born in 1119 to a modest London merchant, he wasn't destined for greatness. He carved it out for himself. Sharp mind, sharp tongue. He studied in Paris, learned law in Bologna and Auxerre, and caught the eye of powerful men. By the time he entered the service of Theobald, Archbishop of Canterbury, he was already maneuvering his way toward the highest circles of influence. But it was his appointment as Chancellor to King Henry II that changed everything. Not just for Becket, but for England. Imagine it, a king in his prime, brilliant and fiery, and a chancellor who matched his wit, drink for drink, jest for jest. They were inseparable, hunting, feasting, laughing late into the night. Some even whispered they were more like brothers than sovereign and servant. Henry didn't just trust Becket, he relied on him. And when the Archbishop of Canterbury died, Henry had an idea. Install his loyal friend in the church's highest seat. Keep the clergy in check. Bend God's court to the will of the crown. It was perfect. Until it wasn't. The moment Becket became Archbishop, something shifted. He shed the silks of court life for sackcloth. The lavish feasts turned to fasting. He gave up wealth, titles, even friendships, and for piety, for principle. To Henry it felt like betrayal. He'd handed Becket power, and now that same power stood in defiance. But was it betrayal or conviction? Can a man truly change, or does power simply reveal who he always was? As tensions rose, the bond between king and chancellor began to rot, and in its place grew something far more dangerous, a holy war, fought not on battlefields, but between altar and throne. By 1164, Henry II had had enough. The church was meddling, priests were dodging royal justice, and in his mind there was only one way to fix it: strip the clergy of their special treatment, bring them under the king's law. So he drafted a set of rules, the Constitutions of Clarendon. On paper, they looked like common sense. If a priest committed a crime, he'd face the same punishment as any man. But hidden between the lines was something far greater, a quiet revolution against centuries of church autonomy. Henry needed one thing: Becket's approval. And the moment he asked, the answer cut deeper than a sword. No. Becket refused, not once, not hesitantly, but openly, defiantly. To the king, it was treason. To Becket, it was duty. He saw the crown's reach creeping into God's house, and he wasn't going to let it in. That refusal set fire to everything. Threats followed, trials, humiliation. Henry summoned Becket to answer before royal judges, but Becket didn't kneel. He fled. Crossing the Channel, he landed in France. Exile. 6 long years of it. Begging the Pope for support, dodging assassins, wearing rags, praying for strength. All the while Henry tightened his grip on the English church, appointing bishops loyal to him, tearing down Becket's influence, brick by brick. But Becket waited. Until 1170, he returned. Not quietly, not humbly, but as a man with nothing left to lose, and he came with thunder. He excommunicated the bishops who'd sided with the king, struck their names from the church, damned them publicly. To Henry, this wasn't just provocation, it was a declaration of war. What was Becket thinking? Did he believe God would shield him from the blade? Did he think martyrdom would prove his point? Or Was Becket's defiance a noble stand for the Church, or a reckless challenge to royal authority with deadly consequences? Because at this point, it wasn't about laws anymore, it was personal, and someone was going to pay for it. The final spark may have come from a king's lips. History remembers the words, "Will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest?" A drunken outburst, a careless rant, or an unspoken order. 4 knights heard it. Reginald Fitzurse, Hugh de Morville, William de Tracy, Richard le Breton. They weren't known for hesitation. They didn't ask for clarification. They simply rode away and straight to Canterbury. They entered the cathedral cloaked in royal banners or holy purpose. They carried no scroll of law, only steel. On December 29th, they stepped inside. Swords, hidden under cloaks. Faces tensed. Steps, heavy. The choir was singing. The air was cold. Becket was at vespers, praying, unarmed, surrounded by monk, but unafraid. The knights demanded he come outside and answer for his crimes. He refused. The monks begged him to flee, but he wouldn't move. He stood by the altar, not with arrogance, but with resolve. He told them, "Here I am, not a traitor, but a priest of God. You can kill me, but I will not run." And they did. One struck his head, breaking his skull. Another cleaved deeper. A third crushed the wound until brain and blood splattered the cold stone. They sliced until the man who once laughed beside a king lay still in a pool of red at the foot of the cross. There was no trial, no verdict, just execution in the house of God. The cathedral echoed with screams. The 4 knights fled unpunished, unrepentant. But what truly passed through their minds? Did they believe they were executing justice, carrying out a sovereign's will, or were they merely pawns, tools, sharpened by royal frustration and dulled by blind loyalty? No one knows what they whispered as they rode away. But the world was never the same again. When the news reached the people, it didn't just spread, it exploded. A man of God had been slaughtered in his own church or by men who served the king. The reaction across Europe was immediate and furious. In the streets of England, whispers turned into prayers. In France, in Rome, in the halls of every Christian court, Becket wasn't just mourned, he was sanctified in the hearts of the faithful. He had stood firm against a king and paid with his life. Blood had turned into legend. Pilgrims flooded Canterbury. They wept at the spot where his skull had been broken. They touched the stone where his brains had spilled and called it holy. Miracles were reported. The sick were healed. And soon, the man once mocked for being too proud, too political, was seen as a martyr, a saint. For Henry, the weight came crashing down. He hadn't wielded the sword, but the world believed he'd lit the fire. He locked himself away. He wept. He fasted. And then, he walked barefoot through the streets of Canterbury. Yes, the King of England, barefoot, clothed in sackcloth, bloodied by monks who whipped him as he kneeled at Becket's tomb. It wasn't just theatre, it was desperation. And it may have worked, because in 1173, just 3 years after the murder, Thomas Becket was canonized by the Pope, declared a saint. His shrine became one of the most visited in all of Christendom. So here's the paradox. A king who tried to control the church ended up immortalizing the very man who defied him. Becket's death did what no liturgy, no sermon she ever could. It made the church stronger than ever before. But deeper still is the question that lingers. Can an act of violence ever lead to redemption? Or does every drop of blood stain forever, no matter how loudly we beg for grace? After the blood dried on the cathedral floor, Thomas Becket didn't fade into memory. He became something far greater. His tomb, carved in quiet reverence, turned into a river of footsteps. From peasants to kings, pilgrims came in waves, weeping, kneeling and praying, not just for miracles, but for courage, for justice, for the kind of faith that defies power. The site pulsated with stories. Candles flickered day and night. Crutches were left behind. Coins were dropped like confessions. And out of this sacred devotion came art, words, legends. Centuries later, Geoffrey Chaucer wrote The Canterbury Tales, a pilgrimage of stories wrapped in wit and sin and prayer, all bound together by one destination, Becket's shrine. His death rippled through culture, not just as tragedy, but as a mirror, reflecting every age's struggle between conscience and control. But nothing escapes the fire of kings forever. In 1538, almost 400 years after Becket fell beneath the sword, another Henry sat the English throne, Henry VIII. And he saw Becket not as a saint, but as a symbol of rebellion, a thorn in the side of royal supremacy. So he ordered it destroyed. The shrine was dismantled. Becket's bones, gone. Stolen, burned, buried, no one truly knows. His name was erased from calendars, his memory scrubbed from churches. The crown had come full circle, crushing the man who once dared to say no. But it didn't work, because legacies don't live in bones. They live in defiance, in words, in the trembling silence of a man refusing to flee as swords close in. Becket's story still walks beside us, whispering to every soul caught between duty and danger, faith and fear. How does the legacy of a man persist when his physical remains are destroyed? Maybe the better question is, how can it not? Centuries have passed, empires have risen and fallen, but the question Thomas Becket faced still haunts us. When power demands your silence, will you obey? Or will you stand alone, knowing the cost may be your life? Becket's martyrdom wasn't just about church and state. It was about principle, about the terrifying weight of conscience. He could have compromised. He could have made peace. He could have walked away. Instead, he chose the altar over the throne, prayer over politics, conviction over survival, and in doing so, he became a symbol that outlived stone and steel. A warning etched into time, because history has a pattern. When authority goes unchecked, when voices of dissent are crushed, when loyalty to truth is punished, tyranny creeps in quietly. And yet there's always someone, a Becket, in every age, who dares to say no. Today, the names and faces are different. The battlegrounds have shifted, but the war between conscience and control, still raging. Whistleblowers, protesters, journalists, teachers, soldiers, even neighbors, each faced with the same impossible question: do I stay silent or speak the truth, no matter the cost? So now we turn to you. What would you sacrifice for your beliefs? What would you have done in Becket's place? Would you have bowed to the king or stood firm, knowing it might be your last stand? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because Becket's story doesn't just belong to history. It belongs to anyone who's ever been forced to choose between obedience and integrity. And that choice is never just his. It's ours too. Thomas Becket's journey, from a close friend of a king to a defiant archbishop, and finally a martyr, is more than just a medieval story. It's a testament to the power of conviction, the cost of standing up for what you believe, and the way a single life can ripple through centuries. His death shook kingdoms, his legacy shaped faith and politics, and his story still challenges us today to ask ourselves how far we'd go to defend our truth. So take a moment, let Becket's life settle in your mind. What does it say to you about power, loyalty, and sacrifice? If this story moved you, if it made you question or inspired you, please like the video. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more journeys into the past that still speak to us today. Because history isn't just about what happened, it's about how it shapes who we become.